He's directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him. It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen on fire or land seen on water. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma pujita kaitravocha paramo nirmatsaranam satam vedyam vastavam atra vastu shivadam tapa trayon mulinam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kimba Purir Ishvaraha Sadyohridi Avurudyate Cha Kriti Bihi Susu Subhikstakshana. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam sukamukad amrita dravya samyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasam Alayam Muhur Aho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, even though its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, Verse number 39. At the moment of death, let my ultimate attraction be to Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. I concentrate my mind upon the chariot driver of Arjuna, who stood with a whip in his right hand and a bridle rope in his left, who was very careful to give protection to Arjuna's chariot by all means. Those who saw him on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attained their original forms after death. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. A pure devotee of the Lord constantly sees the presence of the Lord within himself because of being transcendentally related by loving service. Such a pure devotee cannot forget the Lord for a moment. This is called trance. The mystic yogi tries to concentrate upon the supersoul by controlling the senses from all other engagements, and thus he ultimately attains samadhi. A devotee more easily attains samadhi, or trance, by constantly remembering the Lord's personal feature along with his holy name, fame, pastimes, etc. Therefore, the concentration of the mystic yogi and that of the devotee are not on the same level. The concentration of the mystic is mechanical, whereas that of the pure devotee is natural, in pure love and spontaneous affection. Bhismadeva was a pure devotee, and as a military marshal, he constantly remembered the battlefield feature of the Lord as Partha Sarati, the chariot driver of Arjuna. Therefore, the Lord's pastime as Partha Sarati is also eternal. The pastimes of the Lord, beginning from his birth and at the prison house of Kamsa, up to the Moshala Lila at the end, all move one after another in all the universes, just as the clock hand moves from one point to another. And in such pastimes, his associates like the Pandavas and Bhisma are constant, eternal companions. So Bhismadeva never forgot the beautiful feature of the Lord as Parthasarati, which even Arjuna could not see. Arjuna was behind the beautiful Parthasarati, while Bhismadeva was just in front of the Lord. As far as the military feature of the Lord is concerned, Bhismadeva observed this with more relish than Arjuna. All the soldiers and persons on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attained their original spiritual form like the Lord after their death, because by the causeless mercy of the Lord they were able to see him face to face on the occasion. The conditioned souls rotating in the evolutionary cycle from the aquatics up to the form of Brahma are all in the form of Maya, or the form obtained by one's own actions awarded by material nature. The material forms of the conditioned souls are all foreign dresses, and when the conditioned soul becomes liberated from the clutches of the material energy, he attains his original form. The impersonalist wants to attain the impersonal Brahman effulgence of the Lord, but that is not at all congenial to the living sparks, parts and parcels of the Lord. Therefore, the impersonalists again fall down and get material forms which are all false to the spirit soul. A spiritual form like the Lord's, either two-handed or four-handed, is attained by the devotees of the Lord either in the Vaikuntha or the Goloka planet, according to the original nature of the soul. This form, which is 10% spiritual, is the Swarupa of the living being. And all the living beings who participated in the battle of Kurukshetra on both sides attained their Swarupa, as confirmed by Bhismadeva. So Lord Shri Krishna was not merciful only to the Pandavas, he was also merciful to the other parties because all of them attained the same result. Bhismadeva wanted the same facility also, and that was his prayer to the Lord, although his position as an associate of the Lord is assured in all circumstances. The conclusion is that whoever dies looking at the personality of Godhead within or without attains his Swarupa, which is the highest perfection of life. So Bhismadeva says, at the moment of death, let my ultimate attraction be to Shri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. I concentrate my mind upon the chariot driver of Arjuna, who stood with a whip in his right hand and a bridle rope in his left, who was very careful to give protection to Arjuna's chariot. By all means, those who saw him on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attained their original forms after death. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So here we see the absolute value of spending this lifetime in Krishna consciousness, so that instead of seeing Yamaraj at the point of death, we see Krishna. Do you want to see Yamaraj? No, you'd be scared stiff. You'd say, "Oh my God, I should have listened to what Prabhupada said. I should have taken it more seriously. Not make any jokes." So, yes, this moment of death is actually the best moment for a devotee and the worst moment for a non-devotee. You see, and everything that there's a saying. When I was born, I was crying, but when I died, I was laughing. Now, what does that mean? It says, when I was born, I was crying and everybody else was laughing. When I died, I was laughing, everybody else was crying. So that's the statement of a devotee, because the moment of death is glorious for a devotee. And instead of being all broken up and everything, the devotee is meditating on Krishna, not worried about what's going to happen Monday morning. And I have to give these deliverables, and the stock market is going down. What's going to happen to all my money? And these are what you call unfortunate thoughts in the mind because of attachment to the body, misidentification of oneself as the body rather than as the soul. Everything in the material world is temporary. Matrasparsastu konteya sitosna sukadukataha agamapayano nityastam statikshasva bharata. So that verse is very important because it says that just as there is winter and summer season, so one should not be disturbed by the changes of the body or the ravages of time, let's say, because they're going to come and go. They're not going to last forever. They're temporary things. What is eternal is one's relationship with Krishna. That can never come and go. It can stay eternally. But everything else, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O sky and Bharata, Arjuna, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Just like we have to tolerate this weather right now. It's raining every day. It's cold. And yesterday, when we started from here to go down to the food truck, it was snowing here. So the person who was driving said to me, "Well, should we go?" I said, "Yeah, why not? Usually when it's snowing and raining and miserable here, it's dry and not snowing in Seattle." He said, "Really?" I said, "Well, let's take a look and see if that's true." Well, it was true. When we got to Seattle, it was not snowing, it was not raining, and it was a little cold, but not really cold. And so all these things are temporary. They're not permanent. Therefore, we should be dhira. Actually, the English word for dhira is stoic, not disturbed. S-T-O, stoic, yeah, S-T-O-I-C, or stoicism. It was a philosophy followed by the Romans. They learned not to be disturbed. Well, not everybody, of course, but the leaders, not to be disturbed by upheavals, ups and downs. Stoicism. You see how it's spelled? S-T-O-C-I-S-M? Yeah. Okay, so, and that's what this verse is saying. One should be dhira. One must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. And Prabhupada says, in the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magha, January, February. That's now. It is very cold at that time, but in spite of that, A man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the month of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season in India. One has to execute his duty in spite of climatic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas, and although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya, illusion. You got something? No. Okay. So, yeah. So in the Bhagavatam it says that it says that one should become not disturbed. By engaging in devotional service, one develops knowledge and renunciation. So you don't have to cultivate knowledge and renunciation separately. If you just engage in devotional service in a regulated way, you develop knowledge and renunciation naturally. So it's a natural consequence of devotional service. Okay, so then two different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kuntiya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side. And to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. So if you're born in let's say, a low family, does that give you the right not to follow Krishna consciousness? No, not really. You can adopt a better heritage, and that is the Vaishnava Sampradaya, Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Then you're obliged to act according to duty. And this acting according to duty is very important because noblesse oblige, as they say in France. A person of noble background and birth is obliged to follow a higher standard. You can't, and if you come in contact with Krishna consciousness, and especially if you get initiated, you can no longer act in a lower way. You have to act in a higher way. It's your obligation. It's your duty. So acting according to duty is a big theme in the Bhagavad Gita. Like, for example, when Maharshan didn't stand up when Balaram entered into the arena of, I think it was Naimisharanya. And but all the noble people and elders and great sages, they all stood up. And they were the ones that voted so that Maharshan could sit on the Vyasasana. But Maharshan didn't stand up because he was puffed up with false pride. He didn't recognize that Balaram is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of that false pride. False pride always makes a person blind. And they always make big, big mistakes in their life. They always come up with the wrong conclusion because of that false pride. It's very dangerous. In fact, pratishta, the desire to be honored always, is a very dangerous thing because it puts a person in a precarious, meaning very unsteady position. And because of that precariousness, they can easily make the wrong decision and fall down. Now, what is a fall down? Fall down means you go away from devotional service. Whereas Prabhupada said, Krishna consciousness is the process of kicking up. In material life, people want to kick down, kick someone down, step on them, and go up. In Krishna consciousness, we try and kick others up and support them in doing better and better in Krishna consciousness. So that spirit of the ever well-wisher, Srila Prabhupada signed his letters always, "Your ever well-wisher." He didn't say, "Your sometime well-wisher." He said, "Your ever well-wisher." He's always well-wishing his devotees and all people. Just like one time in Paris, I arranged a big program for Prabhupada. It was the first time it was the second time he came to Paris. And it was in the Architectural Institute in Paris, l'Institut d'Architecture, yeah, and Prabhupada was speaking. Somehow or other, we got that place. That was Krishna's mercy, and it was free. It was a really nice place, right in the center of Paris. And he came and spoke, and during the speech, he said, and if you do not take the Krishna consciousness, you will likely become a dog in the next life. So one idiot raises his hand. It's very typical of French people, raises his hand and says, "Moi, j'ai pas de problème d'être un chien," which means I don't have any problem becoming a dog in the next life. And then when we translated to Prabhupada said, "I bless you that you become a dog in your next life." And everyone, we all gasped for our breath when he said that. But the guy thought this was a great blessing. He's such an idiot. So that's why for non-devotees, as we read earlier in 1.9, I think it was 32, Krishna doesn't give them instruction how to go back to Godhead. And for devotees, he gives them instruction how to go back to Godhead. Because a non-devotee is only interested in sense gratification. Well, it doesn't matter. For sense gratification, it doesn't matter whether they have a body of a dog or a human being, right? The dog has sex in public, in the street. And nowadays, there's many human beings that have sex right in the street, right in front of everyone. So what's the difference if you're a human being and acting like a dog, or if you're a dog acting like the dog? It's the same thing, right? Therefore, and the converse is, what's the difference if you're a man and acting as a guru, or a woman acting as a guru? Same thing, right? If you follow the rules and regulations and you give the proper instruction, so there's no difference. However, there are certain bodily differences, and they have to be and functional differences that have to be respected. Just like Haridas Thakur, although he used namacharya out of for social harmony, he did not go into the temple of Jagannath, and he did not eat or respect prasadam with devotees, because in fact, he told Advaitacharya, who invited him to stay with him. Advaitacharya found some cave-like place where he could stay right near him. And every day he would come and take prasadam with Advaitacharya. And one day Haridas Thakur said, "My dear Lord," he said, my dear Advaitacharya, he said, "aren't you afraid inviting me to eat with you and living near you? And you're such an exalted acharya and a brahmana, and you're in the company of other brahmanas. Aren't you afraid that they're going to criticize you for inviting me to your house and feeding me?" And Advaitacharya said, "No, not at all. I'm not afraid," he said. "In fact, I'm very pleased that you've accepted my invitation." So, even though Haridas Thakur is born in a family of Muslims, and he is, basically born in a Yavana or Malecha family, right? Not even part of the Varnashram system, and he was accepted by Lord Chaitanya, but not accepted by the Brahmanas. See? So, and then even Lord Chaitanya, he did not force the fact that the Haridas Thakur should enter into the temple of Jagannath. So he never entered into the temple of Jagannath. And Lord Chaitanya would go, after he would take prasadam, and take some prasadam and give it to Haridas Thakur in a private place and associate with him. So therefore, there are some social, let's say, restrictions or customs that Vaishnavas follow due to the purpose of not disturbing society. Just like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita also, in the 3rd chapter, it says, third chapter, 26th verse, he says, so as not to disturb the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties. So that could very well mean certain brahmanas who are attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties. They're following the rules, but they're attached to the results, right? So they're considered ignorant. And just like Bhagavatam says, Dharma Prochita Kaitra Votra Nirmatsanam Satam, that completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth, right? So as not to disturb the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. There you are. See? So you might be associating at work or different places, or it could be family members who are basically ignorant people attached to the fruitive results of prescribed duties. That means they are following the Vedas, right, to a certain extent, or they are good Hindus, right? But they have attachment to mundane, let's say, results of those sacrifices and rituals that they perform. So what's recommended? It's not recommended to say, oh, you know, there was one devotee in France, he was a fanatic. And he had, mother and father were very good people. They were not initiated like him, but they were very good people. They were always coming to the temple and donating and very respectful. But one day he went to see them. He said, if you don't surrender to Guru Deva, and you sell your house, and you give all the money to the temple, and you move into your dad will move into the brahmacharya ashram, and mom will move into the brahmacharya ashram, and you have to follow Krishna consciousness, otherwise I'm not your son anymore. He went and said that to his parents. So the parents said, they were like shocked. They said, how can we do that? You know, we can't do that. He said, no, you have to do that, otherwise I'm never going to talk to you again, and I'm not your son. And he walked out. 2 years later, he blooped. His mother and father got initiated. And he blooped with some woman and became a karmi. And his mother and father were initiated, and they stayed in Krishna consciousness until they died. You see? So that's not preaching. He did not really preach to them. He was being abusive. Right? So he never read this. This is a verse, 3rd chapter, 26th verse. Rather, by working in a spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness. This is real preaching. See? Sometimes you might have to use a little force, but that's after people have been associated a long time in Krishna consciousness, but they have certain things that they're so attached to that they don't want to make that final step. So either you could nudge them a little bit, or Krishna's going to nudge them big time by taking away all their assets so that they become devastated and they completely surrender. So, Vedaishta sarvirham eva vedya, that is the end of all Vedic rituals. That is understanding who Krishna is and surrendering to him and engaging full-time in devotional service. all rituals, all performances of sacrifices, and everything that is put into the Vedas, including all direction for material activities, are meant for understanding Krishna, who is the ultimate goal of life. But because the conditioned souls do not know anything beyond sense gratification, they study the Vedas to that end. In other words, they study the Vedas to improve their sense gratification, just like people do yoga to improve their sense gratification, right? But through fruitive activities and sense gratification regulated by the Vedic rituals, one is gradually elevated to Krishna consciousness if the brahmanas who are directing them are bona fide. If they're not bona fide, then they'll stay like that. They'll keep them like that because they want to keep making money, the brahmanas. Therefore, a realized soul in Krishna consciousness should not disturb others in their activities or understanding, but he should act by showing how the results of all work can be dedicated to the service of Krishna. The learned Krishna conscious person may, in others he says learned Krishna conscious person, may act in such a way that the ignorant person working for sense gratification may learn how to act and how to behave. Although the ignorant man is not to be disturbed in his activities, a slightly developed Krishna conscious person may directly be engaged in the service of the Lord without waiting for other Vedic formulas. For this fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals, because by direct Krishna consciousness, one can have all the results one would otherwise derive from following one's prescribed duties. So, at one time here, when we had that small house, one day one man came, an Indian man, I never saw him before, and he came in, he was very respectful, and he said, I'd like to visit you, I heard about your temple and what you're doing, and I'm very happy to be here, and I would like to hear more about what you're doing. So he was a member of the Arya Samaj, or sometimes I call it myself the Harya Hodgepodge, instead of Samaj, right? Anyway, he came, and he was a nice man. He was a good person, and he saw, I was doing deity worship then, and then cooking for the deity and making an offering and things like that. And he waited very patiently. And after it was all over, I sat down with him, served him prasadam. And then after that, I took some prasadam, and then we sat down and we talked. And he said, what you're doing looks very good, but it's not bona fide. I said, really? I said, what is it that we're doing wrong? He said, this is not the process. The process is you have to do Agnihotram. But even before that, you have to study Sanskrit. You have to learn the alphabet. You have to learn grammar. You have to learn context. You have to learn how to say the mantras correctly. You went through a whole list of things. And then after that, you have to do this, and then after that, do that. It was like 8 or 10 things you have to do, right? Things that would take years, and no guarantee that we would actually do it, right? So then you can do Agnihotram every morning and evening. In other words, he was implying, because Arya Samaj reject deity worship, he was implying that you would give this deity worship up completely. And instead of studying Bhagavad Gita, you study this Agama, this book and that book. And basically he was saying, it's impossible for you Western people to do this. He didn't say that, but that's what he meant. And what you're doing now is a waste of time. You're not going to get anywhere with this, right? So, I don't know. I was thinking, what am I going to say to this man, because, he's so much in illusion that, although he's a nice man, right? He's not a bad guy. Morally, probably he's a very moral person. But this is what you're up against. The Arya Samaj is a Mayavadi. I would even say not even Mayavadis. They're atheistic, right? and they're involved in politics, big time, right? But they are, in one sense, some way or other, protectors of Hinduism, right? But their solution for Hinduism is a dead end, right? It'll lead to atheism. Okay, so anyway, this is what you encounter. So that's why Prabhupada says, for the fortunate man, there is no need to follow the Vedic rituals, because by direct Krishna consciousness, one can have all the results one would otherwise derive from following one's prescribed duties. Haribol. So we'll stop right there and we'll continue this purport tomorrow. There's a lot of points in it. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sorry it went a little late today.